fields of grain, for purple mountain majesty above the fruited plain. America, America, God shed his grace on thee. And
before we begin our regular agenda, I am going to give our clerk, Mr. Dan Esch, the podium for a minute.
Good morning, Commissioners. Dan Esch, Douglas County Clerk. Thank you very much for letting me have a few minutes before we get going on the meeting. I just want to take a few minutes to honor the life of former Douglas County Clerk Comptroller Lloyd Kilmer, who passed away at the age of 95. And he actually passed away on January 6th, but he was living in Arizona, and we never found out about it until this Sunday. There was a note in the World Herald that there's going to be a memorial service for him here in town this coming Saturday, March 5th at 10 a.m. at Carisco Larkin Chapel at 51st and F. And before yesterday, I didn't really know much about him other than he was elected 1968 and 72, served 2 terms as the Douglas County Clerk Comptroller, but he was also a World War II veteran, and this is pretty amazing stuff that I read. There was an obituary in the Arizona Republic that we came across, and it says, Mr. Kilmer served as a B-24 bomber pilot in the 8th Air Force during World War II. He flew 16 missions, was shot down over Holland, and successfully crash-landed his aircraft with no injuries to the crew. Mr. Kilmer was taken prisoner and served the remainder of the war at a prisoner of war camp. I mean, pretty incredible. That's stuff you see in movies, and it was real life for him. After the war, he ended up coming back to Omaha. He came to Omaha, graduated from Creighton, and then eventually, like I said, he served 2 terms as the Douglas County Clerk Comptroller from 1969 to 76. And in fact, I have there's one employee in the clerk's office right now who started under Lloyd Kilmer. He hired her, so still have a connection to him in the office. After his time with Douglas County, eventually he moved to Sun City West, Arizona, and was very active in a lot of veterans organizations. And in fact, he was inducted into the Arizona Veterans Hall of Fame in 2004. So I just wanted to take a moment to extend condolences to any of his friends and family he may still have around here in town. He does have a son that lives in Davenport, Iowa, and a son that lives in Santa Fe, New Mexico. So maybe eventually, if he does have any friends or family in town, maybe reach out to them and maybe do a resolution honoring him. But I guess it would be a date to be determined. But yeah, I just wanted to recognize him for not only his service to the county, but also for his service to the country, not only as a pilot during the war, but also just everything he did for veterans afterwards. So,
well, thank you, Dan. Yeah. Commissioner Morgan has.
Sure.
Dan, thank you. Something you won't know. There's 2 commissioners in the room that served with Lloyd Kilmer. I was only 14 when I was doing that. But we got Bill Green, and he can recall, as I can, Lloyd is the county clerk. He wasn't as smooth as you already are, but he did his job and cared a lot. So it's really nice that you brought this to our attention. I wasn't aware of it, and I thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Also want to just take a moment to thank you for the good job that I'm hearing you're doing, and we appreciate that. It wasn't easy to just step into that at a difficult time, and I know you have great support here with you.
Sure do, yeah.
And they're coaching you on. So continue the great work you're doing.
Thank you.
Commissioner Boyle.
Well, I have an anecdote too. I was elected deputy election commissioner, and I was 13 No, not PJ was 14. And it was an interesting courthouse. It was a real rough and tumble place. There was no union. There was no civil service. And one of the elected officials was elected. And when he did, he fired every person in the office but one. And it was created quite a stir. He was a Republican, a good guy. Actually, he was a shirt-tail relation. He was Irish and related to us through the Carmichael family, who are related to us through the McGuires, and actually to the Kavanaughs as well. So we're kind of intertwined here, as everybody suspected. Right, Claire? All the Democrats are related. Anyway, but one of the things that Lloyd did, and I got along with him real well, what he really did is I consider him the father of the civil service system, because he was controversial and very partisan, which is okay, except that he uttered some famous words that he was picked up on a recording saying that when I'm through with the courthouse, there won't be any Catholics and no Democrats in the courthouse. And when my father-in-law heard that, who was a Catholic and a Democrat, as were most of the office holders, they rushed to Lincoln and got the civil service system established, which was set up as it is today. It's a silo all by itself. We don't hire the director. It is very independent, as many of us have found out the hard way. So, but it's an interesting system. So I respected him greatly. He did create the civil service system because of his zeal for Protestants and Republicans. So anyway, I held him in high regard. I ran into him occasionally, and he was always very cordial, a gentleman, and I noted his passing as well. So I really appreciate your taking time to acknowledge that. I think it's important that we remember people who were the building blocks of our county government, and he was one. Thank you.
Dan, when did you say the memorial was going to be here?
March 5th,
5th? Okay.
at 5108 F Street, so that's this Saturday at 10 o'clock.
All right. Thank you very much, Dan.
Thank you.
You said March 5th?
Yes.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Dan. That was great.
All right. With that, we will move to the agenda for the Douglas County Board of Equalization. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Boyle, Commissioner Kavanaugh, Commissioner Duda, Mr. Kraft, Mr. Morgan, Commissioner Rogers, Madam Chair.
Here. Item A, approval of the minutes of the Board of Equalization meeting held Tuesday, February 9, 2016. And item B, call for a meeting and set Tuesday, March 8, 2016 as a date for hearing on certified assessment corrections reflecting the addition of omitted property to the tax rolls or increased value on property.
Motion to approve.
Any questions or comments? Please vote.
Motion passes.
Citizen comments. Is there anyone in the chamber wishing to speak to the board about an item not on the agenda? Seeing none, we do have 4 resolutions, D through G.
Second.
Any questions or comments? Please vote.
Motion passes.
There is.
Can you state your name, please?
Sure. My name is Amber, and I'm actually here. Boy, I need to grow a couple more inches. I'm actually here. A friend of mine wants to come and address some issues, and I just, she's not able to be here. I know she said she's on her way.
Okay.
So I just wanted to step up for her and not miss the moment. Thank you for giving me another chance. So her name's Gwen Easter.
Okay, and she's on her way?
Yes, she had told me she would be here, so I'm just trying to check her whereabouts, and what she has to share is very important.
Okay, well, it might be on this next agenda item, actually, but if it's not, we can always wrap back around.
That sounds great. I just didn't want to miss it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll move on to the discussion item that's on the agenda, discussion on reduced property values in eastern Douglas County, particularly zip code 68110, 68111, and 68104, and this is brought forth by Commissioner Chris Rogers. Did you want to say a few words?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to give the background, and then there's some people here that I'd like to ask to address it. A few years ago, I guess my understanding is that the history of this came to Councilman Gray from a few people in regards to some property values being lowered that, based on circumstances and proximity, and my understanding of how values are set, probably shouldn't have been lowered. The area was somewhere around Concord Square. That's roughly between Grace and Hamilton, 24th to about Florence. And because of development that was going on there, there was feel that that property shouldn't have been as disvalued as it was. Well, I know there was a meeting with the Register of Deeds and Assessor and some concerned citizens, and then about 2 weeks ago, myself, Councilman Gray, Commissioner Boyle met to get an idea of what was going on with the values, and there were some values that I was shown that seemed like a real big hit to some degree, even though there may have been some foreclosures and other things of that sort. The hits just seem big. And I know, from my understanding, it's not an exact science, but I wanted to give them a chance to present their case here, because I kind of talked to Catherine about it in respects to when we get ready to hire the Board of Equalization referees, and to kind of prepare for a point that, you know, depending on what happens, I might be pulling a lot of properties to try to get some answers at the end. So with that, I want to ask whoever wants to come up first to come and present the case. And my hope is that we can have some dialogue, and hopefully the Register of Deed Assessor will come down and we can begin some steps to get some answers to it. So with that, Reverend Cabot.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Reverend Portia Cabot, and I stand before you because on January the 16th, I went on the Douglas County Assessor's site to look up a piece of property that my church had been deeded over, and I had signed the papers. Prior to that, going down in December to prepare the papers for tax exemption, I noticed that there was a preliminary hearing brochure that said you had to apply or look at the valuations that came out on January 16th, on January 15th. So January 16th, I looked on there and noticed that the property that the church now owns was valued at $94,300, and for 2016, it had a value of $38,100. And so based upon that figure, I could not understand. I mean, I've been to school, I have a degree, math just didn't add up. And so I met with our Douglas County Assessor and Register of Deeds and asked her to come to the church for a community meeting. Her and her staff did come on January the 30th, and I'm very appreciative of that, to explain to us the process that was used, as well as to answer some questions. And when we met, we really did not get the assessment tool that was used or the formula. We're just asking to understand how could the land be decreased almost 60% or more, because if land was $6,600, how could it go down to $1,100 in 1 year? Whether it was overpriced years before, why wasn't it done gradually, or why was the property owners not informed? And so from that, I was not pleased with the answers that we received, and just concerned as members began to check into it, that I thought that it was important for us to bring this issue to you so that you could get some answers if we could not, to understand what is happening for those of us east of 48th Street whose property has been drastically decreased. And we really don't want to devalue people in that neighborhood. I mean, there are so many other things that they are taking a hit on. Why is property, and what has happened to the land east of 48th Street that has caused it to go down in value so drastically? So please, that is the issue that is before you. Thank you
very much.
I'm Pastor T. Michael Williams here in Omaha. Just wanted to add to what Pastor Cabot has already said. we have with us today Mrs. Carol Hooks, and her land valuation 2011 to 2015 was $6,500, and currently is $800, 2016. There are a neighbor of hers and her address is 3347 North 39th Street. At 3813 Pinckney, the valuation went from $5,700 to $1,400, and at 4111 North 41st Street, the valuation went from $5,400 to $900. I was privileged to be at a meeting. You all are familiar with the issue that happened in regard to the city this past spring regarding contractor inclusion. Mr. Preston Love called together a number of contractors and community leaders, North Omaha community associations and so forth. And that day, after that press conference was held, I just thought to ask. There was a news person that I had recognized. I came here in 1986. I think you were mayor then. But this news person had come here in 1977, as I recall. And I just asked him, I said, this issue is about these contractors not getting work on jobs that are being done even in their area, in their neighborhood. And so, what do you think about this, just objectively? And he said, it seems to me this area of the city always gets the short end of the stick. And I just wanted to share that to say, we aren't accusing anybody of anything, but something doesn't look right here. We certainly do appreciate Mrs. Battiato and her staff coming. I think they shared what they knew at the time, but we didn't get the formula that we asked for. We understand there are variables, but how did this happen? And so we do appreciate you looking into it. We do ask that, we don't need to get the short end of the stick, and we certainly don't need to get any longer. Thank you very much. Appreciate
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Kim Donovan, 1135 Leavenworth Street here in Omaha. I am here representing OTOC, Omaha Together One Community. Some of our OTOC leaders also attended the meeting with Ms. Battiato at Clare Memorial United Methodist Church a few weeks ago, where we learned that a wide swath of Northeast Omaha may have been overvalued for quite a number of years. It appeared that people may have been receiving misleading information about the value of their most important financial asset, their home. We know in Nebraska that the assessed value of homes are supposed to reflect pretty closely the market value for those homes. We understand that the assessor's office can't determine or influence the market value. It can only try in its methodology to accurately reflect it, and it appears that hasn't been happening for quite some time, and that's what's raised our concern. The proposed 2016 valuations have caused a great deal of alarm for residents in this area that have seen their assessed value decline dramatically. OTOC believes that it is now incumbent on the tax assessor's office in Douglas County to explain to the residents of Douglas County what the methodology was that resulted in these dramatic declines in 1 year. I would just like to read into the record the specific questions that we have, and then I have copies that I can distribute so that each of you will have copies. In what areas of the city were the assessed values of properties significantly overvalued? How long have properties been overvalued? Why were these properties' values incorrectly assessed in these areas of the city for so long? What was the process the assessor's office used to correctly value these processes? In other words, did the methodology change this year? Was that one reason why the values changed so dramatically? And is this the same methodology that's now used throughout the city? Why are the property values in such variance? We have seen large fluctuations year to year, which again can't possibly reflect a market value change. Those are just not swings that Omaha sees in its market value. Why are the property values in such variance? And what would you say to the residents of Northeast Omaha who might perceive that this widespread reduction in property values creates an opportunity for developers and government entities to acquire land and property in this area at a much lower price? Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good morning.
Good morning.
I know most of you here. I'm Lou Myers, 4927 Pinckney Street, and I never thought that I would be before the county board saying that people were complaining about their property taxes being lowered. I mean, how many years when I worked in government was everyone complaining about the other thing? And I myself have said, you know, my property looks nice on the outside, come visit the inside. As we know, we're talking about the older parts of Omaha where the outside and the inside aren't necessarily the same. It's very impossible for the county assessor to do anything other than a drive-by without costing a lot of money and a lot of stress on everybody. However, to put this in a little bit of historical perspective, which just to kind of read into the record, in the past there were things like the interstate going through North Omaha. There have been developments in North Omaha where we've done some eminent domain. And it's not so much the fact that the houses are being devalued in terms of taxes, it's that the land value has gone down that I find a little bit disconcerting. We have done put a lot of money into Northeast Omaha to improve the neighborhoods, to bring back businesses, to build new infrastructure, and for the land value to go down. I can see the house values being overvalued for a long time. Historically, they have been. But this is a big concern, and in the community, people don't understand necessarily the difference between assessed value, market value, and appraised value. And so to them, when they see that their property tax value has gone down, they kind of assume that it's all the same thing. And so there's a lot of people who are really worried, especially elderly people, who are thinking that their main asset is now worth nothing. And there's also a lot of people who are around 24th and 30th Street and some of the development corridors going like, okay, suddenly my land is worth nothing. So that means if you want to come in and put a new grocery store or a new business in there and the city's going to come in and do that, you can come in and eminent domain my house for next to nothing, which is a huge concern. So I'm not as familiar with, as Pastor Portia and everybody else, with the issues, but I just wanted to kind of put a little bit of historical perspective on that and say that, you know, some explanation should be provided. And if it has been historically overvalued, I mean, you can't go back and refund the taxes, but something needs to be explained. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Anyone else? Commissioner Rogers?
And, you know, if somebody from the assessor's office can come and answer some questions, I guess just pose, because to the board, this is a kind of different, this is the opposite paradigm of when I first came on the board. And in 2005, when I came on, my understanding was the county had got jumped up by the state one time, and we were on the verge because we weren't meeting that. And how I explained it was that, so the assessor at the time, Roger Morrissey, we had a series of meetings around the community to kind of explain this. And there were people getting 10, some 20% jumps in their property value. And the rationale was because we had to adjust it by the state, the assessor worked from the west down because west property appreciated faster. So by the time we got there was these big jumps and people were coming and asking why, so we tried to explain it. Now the feel then was that they were getting priced out of their home to the fact where they couldn't afford it and they would go into a certain stage. And, you know, as was mentioned from the mic, and even myself trying to get a grip on it, the sophistication of understanding the subjectivity of how this happens is mute to people. Some people were scared when I was explaining the value and coming in their house. Some people thought once somebody came in their house and they saw a deficiency, their house could be taken. And I had to reassure people that that was not the case. But like was said from the mic, you take the atmosphere that's going on now, and basically that atmosphere is, I think a lot of people at certain stages in their life, this is their most valuable asset. It's going down. How I understood the justification is, at least how I thought the measurement went. I know it was some subjective measures, but even to me, some of these jumps seemed big when it was brought to my attention. And so you take the need to want to develop, and, even though that's not the purpose of it, all the discussion about the land bank. And people are watching this, and they're just wondering, where is this feeding in? So this is the culture that's going around, and want to get some of the questions answered with that. So with that, Mike, if you can answer them, let's go at it.
Good morning. Mike Goodwillie, Douglas County Assessor's Register of Deeds Office. Let me try and give you sort of the overview for what we did, and then if you have specific questions about methodology, I may have to call on Jack Baines, who's our Chief Deputy in charge of appraisals. Statutorily, we do have a duty to try and assess at what's defined as actual value, which is further defined as market value in the ordinary course of trade, the most probable price a property will bring in an arm's length transaction. And so the behavior of buyers and sellers really matter to us in telling assessment offices about what the market value may be. And we are required to follow the law and value the property under that standard. And so to that end, reviewing sales data becomes very, very important. In the area we're talking about, there are many what we call smaller market areas. We don't believe North Omaha is monolithic. Instead, we find many smaller market areas, each of which may have their own characteristics. But during the window of 2013 to 2015, which is the window of sales we have to review to set values, we had 51 vacant land sales and another 811 improved sales that had improvements on them. And what the data we were seeing over on the appraisal side was that properties were simply assessed too high. Not every one or in every market area, but overall and on balance too high. We also had probably not done a physical review of much of the properties in a number of years. That's long been sort of an issue where we really had to try and figure out how to apportion relatively scarce resources to meet our statutory obligations to do physical reviews. But that becomes important to verify both quality and condition of property. In older neighborhoods, condition especially is a really, really, really big factor. And during that process, during the process leading up to setting preliminary values for 2016, we reviewed vacant land first and then improved residential properties. And what we were seeing are assessment sales ratios, which is kind of the yardstick. You take the assessed value and divide it by the sales price, and that's sort of your yardstick for deciding, okay, are those values in the range or not? And what we were seeing were a lot of ratios over 100. Now, the acceptable range for us is between 92 and 100% in terms of level of value. And so based on market data and physical review, primarily the sales, and then reviewing for quality and condition, we reappraised the area. And after the reappraisal, the median level of value is now at 97, which is within the acceptable range. Overall, improved properties were decreased 8%, and vacant 23. Now, obviously, some of the examples we've heard today is more than that. And what I'm saying is, it's not monolithic. Everybody didn't get a 23% bump down or an 8% bump down. Some came down more, some came down less. We are mandated to be within that 92 to 100% range by state law, and we are. The consequences of not being there are something that Commissioner Rogers touched on. If we're not there, the state can order a percentage adjustment to a class or subclass. I can tell you from personal experience, watching that for years and years, those percentage adjustments are really blunt instruments. That when everybody gets a percentage increase or a percentage decrease, you may help the overall level of value. What you may not help are levels of value within that community. So, for example, if your house, Commissioner Boyle, was valued at closer to 100% than Commissioner Dula's was, and you all got the same increase, you'd get pushed over the range, and you might be just about getting to be fair, and vice versa. So what our hope was when we did the reappraisal of the area is that we could adapt the values to what we were seeing in the market condition, to the market conditions, with a little bit more skill, a little bit more accommodation for individual circumstance in individual market areas than a percentage increase or decrease would do. And so what we've tried to do is to perform our statutory duty based on what we've seen from empirical market-based data. What we can do, I think several of the people that have talked to you are interested in, well, how did we get there? I think we can certainly generate the sales that we used and their assessment sales ratios to show where they were. What was the empirical data that we were looking at? We would be happy to do that. We would also encourage people who are concerned about their individual properties to come in and visit with us. I think some did during the preliminary hearing process, probably not as many as we would have liked, but by all means, come in, talk to us. We do mass appraisal, and mass appraisal means making some assumptions about larger groups of property. But if your individual property, if we've got it mischaracterized in terms of condition, it's nicer inside than how we looked at it, or some other factor that might have to do with the value, by all means, come in, talk to our appraisal staff. We certainly don't believe in turning people away that want to come talk to us. With that, if you have specific questions, we'd be happy to try and answer them. I may need to call on the bullpen over there because the actual technical appraisal stuff is maybe a little bit above my pay grade. But we'd certainly be happy to try and answer questions.
Yes. A quick question for Pastor Michael. Hold on. Could you come to the... Sorry about that. Michael Williams. When you mentioned the value of the land had decreased, you're talking about just the value of the unimproved land, correct, to $800?
That's correct. The improved
not
land decreased a little bit, but not as drastically as the land itself.
I needed that clarified.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Boyle?
Yes, I had a question for Mr. Goodwillie. First, are these, in listening to this today, it seems like, are we talking about primarily a reduction primarily in the value of the land, or also the improvements? I know some of the improvements were affected.
I would have to say some of both.
Okay. So let me ask you, years ago, you'll be shocked to find out, don't hit your head and fall on the floor, but you'll be shocked to find out that I was hired as an assessor to go out on a state highway project and assess the value of property. And
my flabber has just been gassed, Commissioner Boyle.
Anyway, one of the things that we looked at a lot of factors, and I wonder whether today, I don't remember, but today, if something was being done in any part of the city, and let's stick with the northeast part of the city, if something was to, if the North Freeway were to be extended beyond up to Blair or wherever, and so the state people come in, what would they look at the valuations to try to determine what's a fair price to offer these owners?
I'm not familiar enough with their internal process to probably say. It might be something they look at, although I do know that they have their own appraisers too.
Right.
So, my suspicion is that might be something they look at, but I think they'd probably want to appraise it themselves.
Well, it seems to me,
And the reason I know that is over the years we've had some people leave our shop to go work for departments of roads and do appraisals and that kind of thing. So I don't think they purely rely on our data.
I don't think it's purely, but I think if an appraiser is going to go out and look to see what the value of property is to go plowing on through with the North Freeway, one of the things they'd certainly look at would be the high credibility valuation placed by the Douglas County assessor on property. And if they say it's $2,000, even though last year it was $20, I mean, they'd be fools not to go with the two. So that concerns me, and I think that's where a lot of this fear comes from, because, you know, Senator Chambers talks quite a bit, at least he used to, about how flat that area is north of Omaha, and how, you know, there aren't that many areas like that in Omaha, a lot of a hilly area. This is prime redevelopment property. That's in my estimation, and I think Senator Chambers was correct. And that concerns me, that I think they would, I really did think they'd be crazy not to look at what the assessor said. I think you're credible, so that's one thing that concerns me. The other is, I made some notes here. Oh, I'm going to ask you, you know, the office has been damned and not praised, but usually damned for not going out and reassessing territory. You know, you are, in my estimation, and I think Commissioner Duda's, underfunded in some of the things that you need to do. I mean, compared to other counties, no question about it. So is this something you're going to be doing to southeast Omaha? Are you going to be doing it to central Omaha? Are you going to be doing this to the whole county, this kind of reassessment?
A couple of things. First, I don't want to put words in Mr. Bain's mouth, and I don't want to set his priorities for him here.
Right.
But yeah, I think if we see value movement in those assessment sales ratios that is indicative of needing to do a reappraisal, that's exactly what we're going to do.
Well, you know, I'll tell you the truth, it really surprised me when this issue came up and I was asked to attend the meeting. It surprised me because, first of all, it was so large, and I do know the financial constraints the office is under, and you've done a remarkable job thus far in making these things happen. But I was very surprised because the assessor's office has never had the financial means, in my estimation, to do this sort of thing. And if you're able to here, then it seems to me you're going to be continuing to do it, which I don't know I just don't know what's to come. First of all, I mean, it's a terrible drop in revenue to all of the taxing agencies, you know, to be greedy.
Well, I would let me stop you for a minute.
Okay.
You were talking about drop in revenue, and you were also talking about, you know, prime development, and would this help that happen? I don't want to sound flip, but we don't care about that stuff.
I know you don't.
I mean, the city calls us and they want the value bumped, and we tell them no, we have to value property based on the empirical data that we see. And similarly, with respect to some sort of plan for future development, no, we haven't been called by developers or anybody that wants to do eminent domain or any of that kind of stuff. You know, that's not on the radar screen.
Okay. And I know that's.
And I sitting here listening, I can certainly understand the juxtaposition of these events might lead someone to think, wow, there might be something going on. But I can tell you, over the years, when people have called and want us to do this with value or that with value, you know, without any kind of empirical backup, we're not permitted to do that.
And I never would suggest you do that. I'm just saying that this could be an unintended consequence.
Sure.
And that's really what I'm saying. I'm not suggesting that you're bending to the will of anybody to do what you did. And I think, you know, that's what you're supposed to do. But I wonder whether, how does this affect the percentage that you report to the state? I know you have a 92% threshold.
Well, that's what I was trying to say in the last part of my remarks, and I probably blew right past it. But at least for those areas that we've reappraised in northeast Omaha, our median level of value for those properties is now 97, which is within the range, you bet.
Well, what was it before?
It was, 104, Jack, when we did our preliminary stats?
How much, 104?
It was 104, yeah. Here, why don't you come on up? Would you introduce yourself?
Jack Baines, Chief Field Deputy, Douglas County. To answer your question, the improved properties were, when looking at the sales ratio studies, the improved properties were overassessed by about 4%.
4%?
4%.
But how is that, that's overall, but how
That's
does that?
overall.
So-
And that's just based on the sales analysis. I'd start drilling down a little bit to look at what's typical for the area and try to determine how those neighborhoods should, or market areas should be adjusted.
Well, tell me, how does this phrase sales analysis, how do you square that with chasing sales?
Well, chasing sales is unfamiliar to me.
Well,
To me, chasing the sale is how you're adjusting a property to match the sale price.
well, I mean, that's kind of what, it's, to me, there's really a line there that I just don't see a lot of distinction.
Well, here's the distinction I'll provide for non-appraisers, because sometimes they baffle me too.
Okay.
And that is, if all you're doing is taking individual properties and you're saying, oh, well, that one sold for X, I'm going to adjust the value to that. Yes, then you're chasing sales.
Right.
You're not chasing sales when you take that data and spread it over an entire market area or an entire neighborhood.
You're just kind of applying a massive chasing sales.
Well,
kind of an
chasing
average
sales is usually a term of art, meaning you're fiddling with individual properties.
and chasing sales, of course, are illegal. So what you're doing is you're taking, it seems to me that you're taking the sales of a territory and then you're averaging it out and then you're applying it to the territory, which, I mean, that just really seems to me like a backdoor way, and backdoor way of chasing a sale. That's my opinion, but I know I'm not totally right, but close to being right.
Well, I'm not even sure you're close to being right, but as the leading rabble-rouser on the board, that should be a familiar
That's right,
feeling to
I know
you.
that. Let me ask you one last question that'll be really unsettling. What will you do if the Board of Equalization votes to reestablish the previous values?
Well, we'd have to think about that.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you said that, because at least you'll think about it, okay? Because that could be a possibility. That we would, when all of these come back through and they come with these reductions, that we would look at that area and we would say, no, they're going back up. And then, of course, I asked the county attorney for an opinion about whose responsibility is it to set valuations, because I don't believe the Board of Equalization should even exist, because we're kind of a paper tiger. We have no teeth, no nothing. And what happens is we reduce valuations or change valuations, and many times the assessor, which they do this year-round and they're professionals, we're not, they come back in and say you're wrong, they raise it or they change it. So in effect, it really doesn't, the taxpayer gets yanked back and forth, finds themselves going back and forth to Turk and all those sorts of things. And it's not intended, it's just that we don't agree with some of the valuations, but ultimately the decision is with the county assessor. That's what the county attorney says.
Commissioner Rogers?
Thank you. All right, Mike. At least my request is, can somebody give me what the average decrease is in the area in some time? Somebody prepare that in time for me, and then also I would like to see the data on how they got there. So those are two things in some time. I don't know how, 2 weeks or so, or however long it gets. But the other question is, what's your name again, sir?
Jack.
Okay, Jack. How long were you there last couple of years? Have you been in office?
No, I was hired in April of last year.
Okay. So how are we using GIS? My understanding is I thought we were using GIS to cover some of the areas to be able to see what changes and things were there to some degree. How are we using that to some degree?
We rely heavily on GIS to give us geographical information. In other words, we can tell from patterns what's moving and what's not.
Okay, from my understanding, I think, at least agree to be dangerous, the intricacies that go into a house's property. Okay. Well, no, let me ask this question first, Mike. You explain to me how many do you think small market areas that there are? Because you made that point of saying that, like putting this in another class, a small market area.
There were approximately 15 market areas, and then within those market areas there are sub areas.
Okay.
For testing purposes, I just look at the market areas. In other words, once we apply values, I retest them to see that the market values are fitting.
15 market areas and sub areas. So was this defined as a market area or as a sub area?
Market area.
Okay. I understand the dynamics of a house, carpet, improvements, things of that sort. But and I guess in time you'll get this to me by the questions that were asked, but land was something that I thought was in rare demand. I mean, this is rare. Land is rare, so it's not a lot of land out there to make things there. So I'm just trying to figure out what changed that to some degree. I'm thinking from what I understand of some other property. Okay, you can't change it because two plots of land that's the same size, one land of grass is not cut, the other is. That's not enough to value the property that much. Is it based on something in the Land Reutilization Commission that triggered this? That's the hard part I'm seeing with the land piece, because land is like this thing that's not being a lot more made. So how is that increasing it that fast?
I think I can answer your question quickly. When I looked at sales, what I looked for were arm's length sales of raw land. Didn't have any improvements. And what I seen was that the sale prices indicated we were over-assessing them by quite a bit. Where the previous number came from, I don't know.
Mike, well, so this first time I heard this period, you said like the assessments now are based on a range of 2013 to 2015.
That's the sales measurement period, and it's been that way for quite some time.
So it's a 2-year period, previous 2-year period that the current
it's
year is based
July.
on.
It's like July 1, 2013 to June 30, 2015, thereabouts. We always lag the market just a little bit.
Okay. So, are you saying if we lag it, this is not that period of recession and housing market stuff finally making its way through? This is just a wrong assessment. That's what you're saying.
I suspect there's probably a combination of factors involved, and I'd be reluctant to try and put my finger on just one.
So timeline-wise, we are now like March. You're at the period where you need to get some stuff finalized and get prepped for the Board of Equalization.
Yes, sir.
Board of Equalization starts in May.
June. We will send the valuation notices out at the end of May. People can file protests between June 1 and June 30. If you do what you customarily do, and it's a prudent thing to do in a county this size, to extend the time for the county board to do its work until the 10th of August, that's when you would need to have your referees make their by then you'd need to have your referees make their recommendations and make your determination.
And I don't know the name of this, the new regulation that you all started using a year ago where we...
Overvalued, undervalued?
Yeah, that you all come in and just declare and change it right there. Do these meet that regulation if something comes up?
If somebody comes in and they bring us data that indicates that we've got their individual property assessed incorrectly, yes, we could put it on the overvalued, undervalued list.
And that could happen outside the Board of Equalization?
Well, you would have to approve it.
Yeah, but it could happen outside of the Board of Equalization.
We could go through it, we could prepare the list, we could put it on the board's agenda for you guys to vote up or down.
Okay.
And so by all means, we would encourage people to come in and visit us.
Okay. So I'll just wait to see what you all have for that average decrease in the area and some of the data on how you got there, to explain how you got there. Go from there. That's all I have.
Commissioner Morgan?
Jack, you could correct me on this, but on this chasing sales or whatever, I think what you try to do is you look at a certain subdivision or area. You don't just look at one sale, you look at a number of sales, and then if you see that you're undervalued or overvalued, then you start to make a total assessment of that area, because one sale or two sales or whatever, that really doesn't determine the market.
That's correct.
Is that correct?
That is correct.
Now, when you're looking at commercial buildings, that may be a little different situation from time to time.
A different animal, yes.
So I wanted to kind of bring that up because, you know, I followed this, and as a former appraiser and so on, I, you know, knew that was a basic way that you do things to be fair to the taxpayers and not just single out one property or a few properties. And then you look at that area because you're seeing that something's wrong in that market because you have it undervalued or overvalued. Thank you, Jack.
Thanks, PJ.
Anyone else wishing to speak to the Board of Equalization?
Just want to ask the assessor and Register of Deeds office, noticing now that on their website they have taken down 2016 figures for property owners. So when will it be put back up so that we can address, or even when it comes to the Board of Equalization, when will the taxpayers know how their property is being looked at and assessed for 2016?
Thank you.
We will be putting those values back up shortly. They will still be preliminary values because obviously, you know, we don't have them finalized until the 25th of March. Actually, earlier than that for it to work its way through the system. We will put them back up. They'll still be preliminary until the end of May when we send valuation notices out. And at that time, we'll indicate that they are no longer preliminary. The reason we'll call them preliminary even until that point is because even when we get finished setting values, statewide equalization occurs in Lincoln, and there's always a possibility that they could seek to adjust on a percentage basis to a class or subclass. So you don't ever want to say they're final till those folks in Lincoln are done.
Can I ask why they were taken down if they had already been up?
In past years, what we discovered is we ran into instances where they would look at the preliminary values, and because they were preliminary and they might change yet, then they wouldn't go back and look at the end of May or the first part of June, and they had one expectation for value out of the preliminaries that wasn't met when the values were actually finalized. And the first they figured it out was, you know, after the time to protest had expired, and so they would say, well, gee, how come, why didn't you stay with those preliminary values? And so our concern was, the longer we left in the past at least, was the longer we left the preliminaries up, the more you could have some confusion if they changed. We've discussed that, and I think internally our position has changed, and we're going to post them shortly, probably before the week is out.
Commissioner Boyle?
Are you recommending that individual taxpayers come talk to you about their valuations?
We would never say not to. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Then would you consider doing something a little bit unusual, because there's so many? Would you be willing to hold these meetings, say at Clare United Methodist Church? They'll open the church up, and possibly even in the evening. Would you be willing to do that? Because there are so many people in that area. Parking's much more accessible. I hate to say that about this building, but it would make it much more convenient for the people to be able to get in and get out, particularly when they're working. I'd like to suggest that. I know that it is a burden for you, but if you do it, I think it would be really appreciated.
Okay, we appreciate the suggestion. I guess we'll have to talk about the logistics of all of this. But
okay, and if you have to pay people a little extra, I think we could get that approved.
Well, I don't know. Getting money you guys got from you guys in the past has not necessarily been an easy proposition.
I'll make the motion. I think I got a second here, but
he's hearing things now.
Yeah, I'm hearing things. But I do think it'd be great if you could do it in the neighborhood.
And can I hand you this it's the questions that they want answered, if you could do that and then just send them out to all of us. Thank you. Commissioner Rogers?
Madam Chair, I just wanted to, I guess, kind of summarize and say what I'm hoping to do is, once they provide me the data, then we'll convene and try to find a way to look into that and see what's the decrease is and how they got through the process. And my hope is to then follow up with that from there. And we'll go from there. All right. I think that's...
We have one more. Oh, wait a minute. Commissioner Kraft?
There's someone else.
There's a lady that wants to come down. Ma'am, would you like to come forward? Good morning.
Good morning.
I've never spoken before. It's not on the equalization. I came here.
Could you just state your name and address, please?
Oh, Gwen Easter. I live at 2895 Benny Street.
Okay.
I came here, Commissioner Chris, to ask some, to talk about what is happening in North Omaha. I'm the owner of Safe Haven Early Childhood Preschool Education Academy and the founder of Safe Haven Community Center, which is housed out of my place on 2895 Benny. And I came here because I want to talk about, I want to find out if there's something that you can do to help us, help the child care providers in North Omaha who are being pushed out of business. From the last 3 years or so, from 2012 to 2015, there's been like 115 daycares who have closed down. And I have my business, I've had my organization for going on 17 years, and my daycare for 16 years. And we are I can't speak for every child care. I can speak only to mine, and I have talked to other child care providers in North Omaha who are struggling to keep clients. OPS, Educare, staff has been sabotaging our businesses, telling parents that our daycares are no more than babysitting daycares. No one seems to want to address this issue. I closed down my second daycare because I was losing kids, and at first I didn't know really what was going on, and now I'm struggling too to keep kids. Now I worked very hard for my organization and for my daycare to serve children and families in my community. And I've done it for 17 years with little or nothing, you know. And if nobody else is going to stand up for their daycare, I'm going to stand up for mine. Because I provided early childhood preschool program, a tutoring program for kids. I help kids who have struggled with reading. I was a AmeriCorps Vista volunteer when I first found out that I realized just how bad it was for children. And I opened up my organization to help families in the areas of housing, and I provided GED, ESL class, but now I'm on the verge of losing everything because of what is going on with this system. Now, the Buffett Institute, they are also trying to go and to legislation to have a bill passed, LB 773. They're saying that you need to have degrees in order to work in early childhood, and this is not true. I've worked in daycare since I was 16 at different daycares. You know, if it wasn't for some of the daycare providers in North Omaha, some of our kids wouldn't have made it through school. And I feel that it's unfair that we're being portrayed as only babysitter daycares, and I'm not here to defend people who abuse kids and all that. I'm not here to offend that. I'm here to stand up for providers, though, that are working hard to help children and families. And I just would like to know if there's something that can be done, because we are. And the other thing that I'm having a problem with, all of this is going together. I've been having to deal with a mortgage company. Aqua Loan Servicing is a predatory lender. They've been sued in 49 states, and this company continues to backtrack my payments, saying that I am not caught up on my payments. I don't know what is going on with the properties. I don't know, but something is going on, and I'm just at my wit's end. I do not feel good about having to bring my business to the street like this, but I don't have any other choice because I feel like we're being pushed out. And I'm also dealing with this other issue, and I feel like some of these systems that are set up, they're not designed to help families. They're not designed to help our children. And I'm tired of seeing low-income families being used for people's gain, and they get nothing in return.
Have you spoken at all with the folks from the OPS Educare?
I went to their executive director, and I had a meeting with her right before Christmas time. And she says that perhaps that some of the staff, because she says I've asked around, and maybe some of the staff just being happy about working for Educare, may have said some things that they shouldn't have said. And I told her the damage has already been done. The state says that you have to have 12 clock hours a year. But none of these people have asked the child care business, what have they done over the years to help kids? They just want to assume that not everyone is babysitting. There are daycares who are really trying to help children. Mine's in particular, I can't speak for everybody else's daycare, but I can speak to what I've done, and I've worked hard over the last 16 years to help my kids who come through the school, through Safe Haven. And I've had kids who are in high school now that's doing very well in school. So when they talk about early childhood is important, yes, it is. It works. But other child care providers know that too. They're not the only early childhood program.
Have you gathered the other child care providers in the community to talk about this issue?
Yes, I've gathered a few, and we're going to continue. We have another meeting coming up, and I'm talking to senators who also told me that LB 773 is not something that has to come to legislation, and that's why I feel like that this is an attempt for one entity to control and have power over what is done and said about early childhood, and it's not right. They are a business just like we are. They receive Title 20 funds just like we do. So for favoritism to be given, there's things we have to go out and look for clients. But because they're connected to Omaha Public Schools, they have access to parents in a more greater way than we do.
Okay.
And I just want some fairness. I just want some fairness because I work too hard for my business and my organization, and everything is on the line for me. Everything.
Well, I appreciate you coming, Commissioner Rogers.
Gwen, the second item you mentioned, you have to give me some more information on it so I can kind of see what's what. The first one, I've heard it at the meeting that was in December. And I don't, I'm going to tell you quite frankly, I heard it there and looked into it to some degree, and I don't know what RAM we can do in some regard, because the bottom line of it is the parent making that choice for where the kid's going to go. If you got some beef with Educare and those guys on saying that, I agree. If you've talked to them, hopefully they'll act in that manner. But from when I first heard this said in December and asked some questions about it, the unfortunate thing is I don't know if that's in our realm. The state sets all those regulations for where daycares are. The county has no dealing in some respects with daycare. And at the bottom line of it, the parent is making that choice where the kid's going to go. So I don't know what to say in that respect. The state establishes all regulation, all guidelines, and steers that point to some degree. So I don't know if it's a county battle in that respect.
Okay. Well, we can't compete with free. They also are offering free child care. And again, you're right. Parents do have a right to decide where their children go. And that's so it should be left up to the parents. But instead, there's things being done to guide people right to Educare. There's things being done to make those efforts more. Like I said, they can't go around telling families that our daycares are no more than babysitting daycares, because that sets the agenda that our daycares are doing nothing for children. I mean, and I understand that you can't do anything about it, but I want to bring it out. I want to bring the attention to it because it's not fair what's happening. And like you said, the state sets the regulations. But when you have an entity like the Buffett Institute that is pushing certain things, they're going to have a lot of favor. We don't have access to monies in the manner that others may have, like Educare. We're having to go out and get our business. They're connecting to the school system. Then I feel like if they're going to be able to get certain dollars and things like that, then child care providers should be able to do the same thing. Or better yet, how about giving us a space in the school system for however long that they've done it? I mean, it's favoritism, and it's favoring one business to other businesses. It's not fair and it's not right. But you're right. Parents are the ones who have to do that. But it makes it even tougher. And I'm a small daycare. 12 children is all I can have, and I want to expand, but I can't. I did what I could do. I purchased a property, a house, because that's all I could afford to help people in my community, but help my kids in the community. That's all I could afford. And so people can't have people being prejudiced because we don't have the fancy buildings and we don't have the high-tech stuff. I worked hard for my business, like I said, and I'm going to stand up to whoever I have to stand up to about this matter. And so is other child providers. There are some others that are suffering just like I am, that's on the verge of losing everything that they worked for because of this issue and that nobody wants to address about. I can't get Ben Gray. I can't get any of these people to address anything about this issue. I can't get the news media to even bring forth this story. It's not fair. What's going on? It's not.
Well, I'll tell you, again, I appreciate you bringing the issue, and maybe Commissioner Rogers and I can put our heads together and come up with something. On the second issue, I would tell you to call the Better Business Bureau on this company.
I've tried. I have exhausted I don't want to have to tell all my business.
I know.
But I have tried everything. This is a corrupt company. I've been to the Attorney General's office. I have been to the banking, finance, and all these people continue to do is find loopholes and ways to defend this company. I am current. These people have cost me a lot of money. This is a corrupt mortgage company, and I just feel like there's some laws or some things that needs to be changed in the area of these mortgage companies. These global, they're too global. I mean, and they're affecting people's lives, and you got to go through red tape, or you got to hire attorneys, which I am exhausted. I have nothing else left to hire any attorneys. I just feel like there's some things that needs to be addressed, because all I see is these people getting over. All of these people that are in power have more money than we will ever probably have. I don't know, But I'm just saying that there's some things that is going on in our community with these systems that need to change.
What was the name of the mortgage company again?
It's called Ocwen Loan Servicing.
Aqua?
Ocwen. O-C-W-E-N.
Okay. Could you maybe leave? I'm going to ask Marcos to walk out with you and write your name and contact information down, and then we can maybe continue the discussion on that item.
Okay.
Okay. But thank you for coming to the board with your issue.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Chris.
And after you and Chris maybe visit, then we can
hear more about it to figure it out.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
With that, is there a motion to adjourn out of Board of Equalization?
So moved.
Second.
Please vote.
Motion passes.
We will move to the agenda for the Douglas County Board of Commissioners. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Boyle. Here. Commissioner Kavanaugh. Commissioner Duda. Commissioner Kraft. Commissioner Morgan. Here. Commissioner Rogers. Madam Chair.
Yes, there is a need to go into executive session for purposes of litigation.
So move.
Is there a second? Please vote.
Motion passes.
Because we'll have a longer one after this. Also, it was just brought to my attention that someone left a cell phone here, and in the clerk's office has it. Is that correct?
Yeah, I have it right next to me right now.
All right.
We're voting to
Reconvene out of, yep, and into the Board of Commissioners. Item A, approval of the minutes of the Board
Commissioner
of
Kavanaugh, sorry.
Whoops, Commissioners meeting.
Motion passes.
Held Tuesday, February 9, 2016. And item B, approval of claims submitted for payment process through Tuesday, March 1st, 2016. Any questions?
abstaining because there's a
Payment, okay. Thank you. Please vote.
Okay, go ahead.
It's our sheriff's chief deputies.
Oh.
Next is
Commissioner
the,
Kavanaugh.
Did he tip him?
No.
who didn't?
Sorry.
Oh.
Motion passes.
Next is the consent agenda, items A through N. Is there a motion to approve?
I would request that we hold out items A1.
I would move approval of the consent agenda with that one exception.
Okay.
Second.
Any other questions or comments? Please vote.
I have
One moment, please.
I'm going to abstain again because on item K, our quit claim deed,
Okay.
my people are involved in that quit claim deed.
Yep.
What about it? I'm sorry.
He has the quick claim deed on.
There's a quit claim
He's
deed,
abstaining.
and one of my
Agents is involved in that transaction, so I'm going to abstain.
Please vote.
Okay. Motion passes.
We'll go back to item A1, the Mary X-Ray Source One Healthcare Technologies to provide X-ray system for the Douglas County Health Center in the amount of $41,916.24. This was not budgeted. It was an unexpected expenditure, but Douglas County is to pay half of the amount, and the county attorney will pay the other half. And I'll turn this over to Commissioner Duda as chair of the Board of Trustees.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I think we all are familiar that we received an email from our, I believe, only X-ray tech at the health center. And so we do appreciate, in fact, why don't you come on up, Marlo, if you would, and share your perspective. We got 2 bids on this X-ray machine, and they were only a couple $1,000s apart. Purchasing recommended to us that we go with the lower of the 2 bids. However, our X-ray tech has some other concerns that she brought to our attention, and so this would be the appropriate time to address those.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioners. I'm Marla Ibarra. I'm the X-ray tech, and I have been for about 15 years at Douglas County Health Center. On December 9th, and I'll say this because Mary Ann will understand, but I tried to do some X-rays on a cadaver for the morgue. I do the morgue, I do correctional officers, I do all the youth center, I do CMHC, I do the long-term care, I do general assistance, and we have a state contract with the state TB program. So I do x-rays on all of those, plus employees at Douglas County. My 300 MA stopped working. My 200 didn't work, and my 150 didn't work, and my 100 didn't work, but my 50 does. What that means is I can give you a little bit of radiation versus a lot that I need sometimes, but I have to do it for a long time. So I'm asking you to hold your breath and stand very still for an extended period of time. It doesn't work for somebody alive. So I immediately called Brown's. Brown's is the only local Nebraska company that does this x-ray stuff, period. We thought maybe we could talk about a sole source, maybe an emergency, and then I was told, no, there's companies in California and Texas and Maryland that we can surely get in to do this. So I was asked to speak with county attorneys. So I did and said, hey, you know, I do a lot of this on more cases, even though it's only 10% of my business, 10% of the actual patients, but it's probably about 60% of the actual films. And they said, sure, we'll pay for a portion of it. So then they said, well, will you write specs? Not an X-ray tech's job. I did. I wrote specs. So then they said, we're going to put it out to bid. Okay. So then they sent me the bids and they said, pick who you want. I said, all right. So I did. And then they said, no. No. Mm-mm. They're $2,000 more and you can't do that. And why would you do it anyhow? And I said, well, because we've been using Browns for 15 years almost, and because they've saved us a ton of money, because our X-ray machine is 29 years old. Wow. You don't see that anywhere. But they've done it this far. So for $2,082.76, they said, no, you have to go with the Texas company. So then I was a little upset. I started looking them up, and then I thought, well, whatever. So then I got to thinking about it. Well, they're going to give us a 5-year warranty, but only the first year's labor. So I went into some of their service agreements, and I found out that we'll have to pay mileage. And our local guy, Frank, that's what they said his name was, Frank. He's out of Mission, Kansas.
Say, Laura, could you speak a little into the microphone?
Sorry, I'm a little short. I also need to grow a little bit. They said that they have a local guy, Arlington, Texas, says they have a local guy named Frank who could come out. I could call an answering service or call center, and it would take them an hour to call me back, and maybe up to 4 hours for somebody to come. Well, Frank's out of Mission, Kansas, so that explains the 4 hours. I call Browns now. Browns is locally owned. Commissioner Borgeson, they're in your area, 143rd and C. Browns has been in the medical business for, I believe, 40 years. I've been using them here for about 15. Before I came to Douglas County Health Center, I was at Corrections. I used them there. So I knew how much cheaper they were. When I came to where I am now, we were using Marconi out of Philadelphia, and I immediately switched to Browns at a savings, I think, just my very first order of over $1,000. I have never asked the county to spend more money for anything. Actually, on the contrary, when we did the budget cuts, I gave up 50% of my on-call pay. I immediately stopped ordering anything that I didn't need. I took our maintenance from 4 weeks to 6 to 8 to save money, so I'm all about saving money. Browns right now saves us money, and I know I can't prove it on paper. They'll come out for a 2-hour, 3-hour visit and charge me, or 3-4-hour, charge me $2. If I need something, they'll say, hey, we'll drive it by on the way home. One of the guys will just drop it off. I'll never get that from another place. Right. And I don't think it would take us 6 months to make up that $2,000, although you're not going to probably see it. Right. They're not going to say, hey, we didn't charge you for this. But I think they're local. Of their $43,999, they had originally bid $39,999 before we did send it out for bid. But then they came to our facility, and they're the only company to come, and they saw that some of my wires were buried in the cement, about how some went into the drop ceiling, and so when they actually bid, they incorporated that. And I think that of that $43,999, I think all of those taxes will stay here locally. I don't know how much of the $41,916 from Texas will.
Okay, Commissioner Duda.
If I may, I would like to ask our county attorney a question, because I would like to make the motion to accept the bid of Browns, which is not...
I'd like to second it.
Well, it's not on the agenda. My question is, can I do that today?
Teresa, your county attorney. It isn't on the agenda for today, so I would say with regards to open meetings, I think, no, it would need to be put on for the agenda. I think the only thing on is the Mary X-ray source and acceptance of that bid. I would like to hear today or maybe after the meeting talk with purchasing. I have some concerns with regards to Rath v. Sutton, which is the seminal case on accepting lowest best bidder, but I don't know the terms and conditions of the bids. But if the bids are identical, then the board has to go with the lowest bidder if they're essentially the same.
What about lowest and best? Is that not a condition?
Well, my intention would be to make, I want to go the direction that Marlo is suggesting. And if we can't do it today, we'll do it next week.
Can I add one more thing?
Sure.
We're all about numbers here. $21,800 is what we've spent on salaries since the machine went down on us, doing nothing. Nothing. Radiologist not showing up, me sitting there. $21,800 is what we spent since December 4th. $2,800 is what we spent just sending employees out for x-rays. At the end of this month, the total should be around $34,000 of monies, or we just may as well throw out the window.
What does that mean?
That means that we have radiologists that are under contract that we spend $3,000 a month on.
Okay.
And we've given them that.
And what?
We've given them their paychecks.
Yeah.
They don't have to do anything. You pay me about $25 an hour, give or take, about $4,400 a month.
Okay.
I've done 30 x-rays since the beginning of the year.
So what should we do?
Get somebody soon.
Pardon me?
Make the decision quick. Because we're just spending money on nothing right now.
Commissioner Morgan?
Well, we want to make the decision quick, and I want to support Mike and Claire certainly on your recommendation, and I think the reason I want to support it is not because we want to take the higher bid, but because it's the best bid. And in looking at and hearing what you've stated, that is the best bid. So I thank you for your
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Good work and loyalty to the county and caring so much about spending. So I know we're on the right track, and I think when they start tearing out concrete and finding those wires, like you said, the only one that came out to look, we'll find that we could have a lot of extras anyway. So I'm hopeful that we always like to listen to Teresa and how she advises us, that we can make that decision next Tuesday and get it handled as fast as we can. So
Alrighty.
that's where we are.
Thank you very much.
Commissioner Kraft?
Yes, the problem with lowest and best was a Supreme Court decision Teresa mentioned, where the Supreme Court said the lowest is the best. And we have to look at, in the bidding, Eric Carlson, could you come up front? In the bid specs, is there anything about the installation, or does it say installed?
Eric Carlson, Douglas County Purchasing. I believe the specifications were for the model that we needed, and I believe it was installation and removal of the current machine. Is that correct, Marla?
Is there any option that the company from Texas would have in charging us anything additional in unexpected installation or modification charges?
No, the bids that they received or they provided to us were a fixed price for basically, providing the units, and they bid the exact same model, et cetera.
Because I would like to keep it local, but I believe it was the case you're talking about, Teresa, was that in Kearney?
We don't know why.
1 second.
It was in Grand Island.
It was in Grand Island?
Yeah, I don't know.
Oh, okay. Okay. The reason I ask is the city got sued, or the county got sued, whoever it was, and had to pay the full price of the contract they were going on to the what was the winning bidder that was not awarded. Does that sound correct, Teresa?
What the Supreme Court, what the Nebraska Supreme Court said was that if you have two bids and they're the same, essentially identical, then you have to go with the lowest bidder. And so that city had not done that, and so the Supreme said, yes, you have to do that.
Okay. So now, being the difference in the service time, that's a significant difference. And is that written in the contract, would they say on that?
No, the specifications did not include specifics.
No, but in the bid.
The bid did not have for service provided after installation. So that's kind of the issue I think we're dealing with. And when this was brought to my attention, certainly I understand and respect her experience working with Browns, and I also explained to her that based on the fact that we received bids that met specifications in both of them, going back to the lowest and best bid meeting specifications, I told her that that my recommendation is that we would go with the low bidder. However, if they chose to go with Browns, that we would have to notify the low bidder that they're being rejected. They would have an opportunity then to appeal that. And ultimately, after a couple back and forth and kind of discussing those issues, the department came to me and gave me the acceptance letter to go with Mary X-Ray. So this is the first today that I've heard of that they, that we were going to go another route. And I certainly respect their decision and what they're looking at long term. But I guess I want to make sure that we're doing the right thing in regards to state statute and purchasing bid.
Now, Teresa, is this something we should reject all bids for and send out to rebid to include a service contract?
Teresa, your county attorney's office, I don't know the answer to that. I don't think I have enough information. I'd like to go ahead and meet with Eric Carlson between now and the next meeting, and I haven't seen the specifications for the bid or how the bids came back. My suspicion, based on what was just said, is that it's the same make and model. One's lower than the other. So I don't know if the bid had anything that would make a relevant difference in the specs. And I don't think it did.
And why don't we have them take the time to look at it and
Sure.
what Teresa said, and then the other part of it I think we need to look at is the maintenance. In other words,
Right.
Is there a cost factor with coming the distance, or how is that going to be handled?
Right, I guess my concern would be if it wasn't included in the specifications of the original bid, then
If
to
we
go
can
back and add
consider
that
it,
factor
right.
would be something we'd have to
Yes.
look at.
And then I have the question, if we decide to rebid it, how long would it take? What is the minimum amount of time we can give?
Well, we would typically, once we have the bid published, which would be on a Wednesday, we would want to get that out and have it a minimum of 2 weeks out on the street for the bids to come in and basically received as sealed bids at that point. We can turn it around fairly quickly, and especially knowing that we've got a machine type that we already know is what the department wants. If we needed to make any changes to the specifications, if that's something we're able to do, that's something we can certainly help the department with.
So let us lay this over, as been suggested. 1 week?
Yes.
Okay.
Do we need a motion?
Just make we have more lights first. Commissioner Kavanaugh?
I just wanted to commend Marlo. You're a great credit to Douglas County. Thanks. And I think we'll, after this discussion, end up following your good advice. But really, thanks.
Commissioner Boyle?
Listening to Marla too, I think what we need to do is eventually, I think, and offer this to the legal counsel to think about, reject these bids, and we need to listen to what she said about the need for immediate service. This is equipment that if it breaks down, we need to have somebody here, who can get it fixed. And I think that's a very critical part of this equipment. So that's a big factor that should be included in the bid. And the other thing is, I don't believe that we can favor a Nebraska company. I think that's against the law in Nebraska. We can't say just because you're in Nebraska you get a leg up. But I do think if we take a look at those reject the bids and put in really important, the response time is critical. When something happens, she needs to have somebody here. So I think that's a big deal. That's what I would offer, and I appreciate Commissioner Duda bringing this up.
Commissioner Duda?
My preference would be to move this more quickly than that. I mean, in light of what Marlo was saying about the employees wasting their time while we're waiting for a machine, I really don't want to go back out to rebid. There's no new information for the vendors. We simply want to go a different direction. I think we have the right to select Browns. I get if we can't do it today because it's not listed on the agenda that we were going to do that today. I want to list on next week's agenda that we accept the bid of Browns. If the county attorney feels that I'm not doing anything inappropriate or illegal with that.
Patrick?
This is a question. Is there possibility to lease equipment until such time as the ultimate decision is made, temporary lease of the equipment? And
because of the installation and all that.
Right. And if not, I guess my other question is, what is the effect of an appeal? If a decision is made to select Browns, then is it simply just a matter of the other company coming before this board and asking for reconsideration? Because it's, if it's that gives you some leeway between that and a possible lawsuit if they need to. When you say appeal, if somebody said appeal, does that mean a lawsuit, or does that mean coming before this board and making their case?
Commissioner Kraft?
This brings up something we should include in the bidding. Whenever we have a complex piece of machinery, we should add in factors that include the maintenance and repair.
Service, yeah.
The service. So let's make sure we include that in our bid specs in the future on anything that's critical and complex, please. Thank you.
Commissioner Boyle?
I think things have been covered. Thank you.
Commissioner Morgan?
I think the only thing Eric's going to cover with Teresa is if that maintenance is in there and if we can do it, so we know next Tuesday, so we don't have a lawsuit.
Let's not get sued.
So this is just going to be held over until next Tuesday.
If we take no action on it, I mean, do we have to take action on it?
Motion to lay it over.
Well,
Okay.
I think he's done
Well, that's fine. I mean, I didn't make the motion, and that's my intent. Although I do, when we come back, I wanted to say on the agenda what we plan on doing next week. So I would second the motion to lay this item over for 1 week.
Yes.
I think there is a difference in the bids because we did include a minimum 5 years warranty and 1 year labor, and I was forwarded an email from purchasing where they'd actually contacted Mary X-Ray and said, hey, how's this going to work? And they said, well, we'll talk about a service agreement later. Well, we don't need a service agreement with Browns. It's just agreed upon. So it's actually in there, and that therein lies our difference.
Very good.
Is because their service is coming from who knows where, and ours is right here.
And it's included. Thank you.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you. No other questions or comments? There is a motion to lay over for 1 week. Please vote. Next, we have recognitions and proclamations. There's one resolution recognizing the first responders for the service to our community. Commissioner Boyle?
Yes, thank you very much. I, like everyone in the community, watched and read in the paper and so forth about the work of the Douglas County Sheriff's officers, police officers, firefighters, paramedics, 911 operators and dispatchers, correction officers, and other first responders who really did a terrific job. And I do want to really single out the Douglas County Sheriff's Office, although 911 did some really great things too, and I know that it was a joint effort. So I asked that this resolution be prepared, and I asked that it be in the name of all commissioners, because I believe we all feel this way. And it reads, whereas the men and women of law enforcement and public safety, including Douglas County Sheriff's deputies, Omaha police officers, Omaha firefighters, paramedics, 911 operators and dispatchers, Douglas County corrections officers, and other first responders have dedicated themselves to a career of public service. And whereas there have been several recent major incidents in Douglas County, such as gunmen involved in standoffs with law enforcement and major structure fires. And whereas Douglas County 911 staff and Douglas County and the City of Omaha law enforcement and fire department personnel exhibited professionalism and teamwork that resulted in lives being saved and major fires being contained. And whereas the residents of Douglas County and the City of Omaha owe a debt of gratitude to those law enforcement and public safety personnel. Now therefore be it resolved by this Board of County Commissioners, Douglas County, Nebraska, that this board hereby expresses its sincere gratitude to all members of law enforcement and public safety who strive to protect the lives and property of the residents of our community. That's dated this first day of March 2016. And I would make a motion that we pass this resolution.
Second.
Any questions or comments? The only comment that I would make is to add special congratulations to one of ours, Commissioner Duda, for his 40 years of service as a first responder for the Ponca Hills Fire Department. That was just celebrated last night.
It's kind of Claire's aging out, but we'll, you know.
He is aging out, by golly.
Right. And I do want to make special, I know that a lot of people were involved in these standoffs, but it's my understanding the Douglas County Sheriff's Office really stepped up to the plate and had all of these incidents came to them. And of course, with our mutual aid agreements and so forth, we had terrific support. But I do want to single out the Sheriff's Office and under Tim Dunning and his leadership.
And the also, Commissioner Boyle and I had the opportunity to kind of walk through a process of what, because he's over 911, and also congratulate the 911 operators for the work that they did on this, and many others in the community that we don't really like to talk about or hear about, but unfortunately they're happening. But we are very fortunate to have such good workers in our community to respond. So very appropriate, Commissioner Boyle.
Thanks.
Please vote.
Motion passes.
Citizen comments. Is there anyone in the chamber wishing to speak to the board about an item not on the agenda? Seeing none, we do have public hearings. The first one being public hearing on request to vacate a portion of 192nd Street north of West Maple Road. This comes from our county engineers, and action is scheduled for Tuesday, March 8th, 2016. Good morning, Dan.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Morning.
Dan Kudelak, Douglas County Engineers Office. We're here today to discuss the vacating of a portion of 192nd Street between Maple and 4th Street. Maple Street being on the south here, 4th Street to the north. The area we'll be vacating is shown in the red. And just a little background, and I'm here to answer your questions really if you have any, but in November of 2013, an interlocal agreement was passed by the Douglas County Board to enter into an arrangement with two SIDs to improve parts of 192nd Street and sharing the cost of such. And we've been working with their attorneys on those two SIDs. It's Indian Creek and Indian Point in order to accomplish this. It's been a couple years in the making. We're involved with the Corps of Engineers with some 404 waters of the U.S. and those types of things issues. And that has somewhat slowed down this project, but we think we have a handle on it. The county board directed us in December of 2013 to do a study on the vacating of this road. As part of that study, based on the statutes, since this is within the 3-mile limit of the city of Omaha, we are required by law to have the zoning jurisdiction's recommendation on whether they agree with the vacating or don't agree with it. City Council passed on March of 2014 a resolution which recommended the vacating of this road. So that was a key bit of legal jargon that we worked with the Douglas County Attorney's Office on, and got that accomplished. And so with that, we were asked to do a study. Our study was, we have no objections actually, and we are certainly proponents of it. And we hope to build this road yet this construction season. We're hoping to take bids here shortly, and assuming we get a decent bid, we'll go forward with it. You might recall earlier this month we passed a purchase agreement to mitigate the wetland issues on this project, and that wetland location is located in this subdivision. It's somewhere over in this area. It's actually in their phase 2 of their development, and we are recommending the vacation of this road in exchange for the right-of-way necessary to realign 192nd Street, and that is being accomplished for information through the platting process of Indian Point. When they plat this area here, they will incorporate it into their subdivision plat, and we have through the Gotch family a deed that they will present to the county board upon this vacation being approved by this board. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Dan? Thank you, and again, this will be on our agenda for action Tuesday, March 8th.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan.
Thanks, Dan.
Next is a Class 1 licensed beer, wine, distilled spirits on sale for Omaha Barn Events, LLC, DBA The Barn, at 15220 Military Ave, Bennington 68007. Manager application is Deanna Hankins of 18432 Dewey Ave in Omaha 68022. Is there anyone here wishing to speak during the public hearing of this item? Seeing no one wanting to speak, what's the will of the board?
Motion to close the hearing.
Yep. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I'll close the hearing.
Motion to close.
Thank you, Commissioner Boyle.
Second.
Please vote. Thank you.
Motion passes.
Next public hearing is a transfer budget dollars that are set aside in salary adjustment account for future salary increases. This also provides additional budget dollars for grant-driven budget increases for the county administration, the sheriff, county attorney, juvenile probation, the juvenile assessment center, and the community mental health center. Increased budgets for .com, risk insurance, public defender, and employee fringe benefits. This amount is $2,205,184, and this was brought to us by our finance director, Mr. Joe Lorenz. Action can be taken today after the public hearing. Is there anyone wishing to speak during the public hearing?
Yes, Commissioners, let me take you through this. You know, we do this twice a year. We do the budget supplements, and I'll take you through the components here. The first one is a transfer of $1,538,965 from the salary adjustment fund to the individual funds and departments, and this reflects the union contract settlements and the non-union payroll increases that were agreed to by the board in December. And as you remember, when we put the budget together last year, we budgeted $1,750,000 to the salary adjustment fund. And so this uses the majority of it. But between now and June, I think there may be a couple union contract settlements, but I think the $1,750,000 has turned out to be a good number, and we should be very close to that. And so these salary increases, in effect, have been budgeted for. The second component are the budget adjustments for various offices and departments that need them due to circumstances that have arisen over the course of the year so far. So let me take you through those individually. The first is risk insurance, and this is a settlement of a workers' comp claim that's been outstanding for a long time with the Jacksons. And the workers' comp settlement is in the amount of $475,000, but we're into our excess amount, so 85% of that will be reimbursed via our excess workers' comp insurance. The second piece is for the county administration, and this is an increase that will be offset by the community-based aid grants in the amount of $453,565, and this is primarily reflects an additional amount we received from the Crime Commission for these grants, where the county administration is really acting as the go-between, and we are contracting out to certain service providers in the community, and so we'll receive the funds from the Crime Commission, but then we will distribute them out to, I think there's probably, between 5 and 10 different providers that we've contracted for these services, and this has to be done and completed by June 30th of this year. But there is a 100% revenue offset via grant for this amount. The third one is employee fringe benefits in the amount of $350,000. And this one reflects that in the pension payments, we made the final payroll payment of the calendar year on December 31st, even though, the payroll, which was a Thursday, as I remember, the first was a Friday, so we paid a day early, and under calculations in the way the pension is calculated, you had to accrue the county proportion of it, so it winds up that for pension purposes, we had 27 payrolls within the fiscal year, and so this $350,000 represents that extra pay period, and it's one of these circumstances where for pension purposes there's 27 payrolls, but for payroll purposes there's only 26. Next year, and next year's budget we'll deal with, is the year that happens about every 12th or 13th year, where there will be 27 payrolls within the fiscal year. So this one just is kind of quirky why the amount of the extra payroll for pension purposes happens a year early. But anyway, that's what that $350,000 reflects. The next amount is for the sheriff's office, and those are grants in the amount of $302,459, which are a variety of programs that the sheriff has applied for and received grants for. So there's a 100% revenue offset on those. The next area is the public defender for $225,000, and that's primarily due to additional attorneys required for their workload. This is partially grant funded. I think of that $225,000, there's about $50,000 in grant funding coming. And like I say, that's really been required due to the additional workload within that department requiring additional headcount. The next one is .com. Capital expenditures of $215,000. As you know, in the .com budget, it has operating expenses, but it doesn't really include capital expenditures. And these, there were some capital amounts required this year, and that's what that $215,000 reflects. Next is county attorney for $117,300. Those are also grants that were applied for and received, so there's a 100% revenue offset on those. Juvenile probation received $30,000 in community-based aid grants to do some improvements, primarily over in the Keyline building. And again, so there's a 100% revenue offset on that. Juvenile assessment had one additional grant received for $6,860, which is a 100% revenue offset. And then the last one is the Community Mental Health Center received $30,000 from Region 6 in additional funding that they are going to spend on a temporary position. So in total, if you take the budget adjustments, that comes up to the $2,205,184. Of that, the great majority is grant funded. There's about $800,000 that doesn't have a revenue offset. But the good news is that the inheritance tax receipts are tracking about $1.4 million above budget. So net, that will be able to cover the incremental $800,000 and still give us a little over $500,000 cushion as we go into the last quarter of the year, so that we're still in a position to basically, on a net basis, come in at our projected budget with even the potential for a slight increase to our reserves. So that's the overview. I'd be glad to answer any specific questions.
Commissioner Cavanaugh?
Yeah, Joe, on the budget adjustments, the portion that is for pay increases, it indicates that it's partially for the pay increases that we granted at the end of 2015 for non-union employees. What portion of that 1.750 million is for non-union employee pay increases?
$672,000.
And is that for a complete year of those 4% pay increases?
No, that would be 6 months, the period, because we're in this budget year. They were effective January 1st, so that's the period January 1st to June 30th, which is the end of the fiscal year.
Okay, so basically, 672,000 times 2 is the cost of that 4% pay increase.
Yes.
For non-union employees. Okay. The balance of that is for pay increases granted under collective bargaining contracts?
Yes, there's $571,000 under collective bargaining agreements going forward, and we settle our collective bargaining units sometimes in arrears, so there's $296,000 in excuse me one second. So there's $296,000 in union back pay, which is the period that would reflect the period between when the contracts expired and when the contract was settled.
Okay. Does that count for the entire 1.75 million?
Well, it accounts for $1,538,000 if you add those three numbers: 672, 571, and 296.
Okay. Then that overage, the difference, what's that?
I'm sorry, which overage are you talking about?
Okay, if you do the 672, which was for the non-union employees, and the two amounts for the union contracts, does that equal 1.75?
No, that's $1,539,000.
Right.
And the difference between that and the $1,750,000 is the amount that hasn't been allocated yet, but could be spent in the settlement of union contracts between now and June 30th.
Okay, and just help me out, what's that number?
So it would be about $212,000.
And that's put into, what, a reserve?
It's in the salary adjustment account, and the way it works under the budget, it's if the expenses come up, you either spend it or lose it. You can't encumber it or carry it over.
Thank you.
No other questions or comments? This is the public hearing. Is there anyone else wishing to speak? I'll close the public hearing.
Motion to approve.
Any further questions or comments? Please vote.
Motion passes.
We'll move on to committees, the first being the Finance. Commissioners Morgan and Boyle, the first item is your budget report. Is that just as presented?
As presented, and I think we'll be getting out some dates of some meetings soon, hopefully.
There's quite a bit of, thank you, Sam. There's quite a bit of detail that Joe put in there under all these things, and some of them I've got questions about naturally, but we're heading the right direction. Everything's right on schedule.
Okay, great. And then you have another item, a discussion action on year-end write-down of uncollectible accounts receivable, and this is from Sherry Albin.
Right. I looked at those, and they always bother me because but I think they really are uncollectible. They're companies that have gone out of business and so forth, and they're not huge amounts. There is one in there for Myers Funeral Home, and I'm not sure. I think that comes from the health department, so we need to talk to them before we get involved in litigation, I would think. I'm sure we already talked to them, but Myers, I believe, is still operating.
Would be GA, though? GA.
Pardon me?
General Assistance.
Could have been.
It says Health Department. Commissioner Kraft?
Yes, is any of that from the city of Omaha? Because a few years back on the PBX system, the city was years in arrears. Does anybody know? Joe?
I think we're settled up with them on a fairly current basis, and that's one of the issues that we still have to come back and talk with the people who run PBX about, is the future of PBX.
Yeah, the city is going to another system, are they not?
Yes, I believe so. And
VoIP?
Yeah, and so this whole building is going to voice over IP, and so that just will be the next stage of further, making the PBX system further antiquated.
Thank you.
Okay. No other questions or comments? Is there a motion to approve?
So move.
Second.
Please vote.
Motion passes.
Next is the Human Resources, the weekly personnel report from Civil Service as presented, unless there's questions. Item 2, the weekly CAO report on staff assaults.
There's nothing to report.
Item 3, the legislative issues. I am pleased to announce that our LB 131, that for allowing the county treasurers to receive fees for services rendered to SIDs has passed, and that our GAL 673 has advanced out from committee this AM. And then you have the full report as well in your packets. Commissioner Boyle?
Yes, I want to report a contact with State Senator Sean Kelly sent me a message that Senator, the chair, Kowalski, sorry, I'm messing his name up. Kowalski, I'm sorry, called me. We had a conversation about the NRD legislation that he has. And of course, the NRD is really fabulous for when it gets down to things. They just say, you don't want to be responsible for people dying in a flood, do you? And so, of course, everybody goes, oh my God, no, you know. And so they have a blank check. They are, as far as I know, the only political subdivision in the state that is able to sell bonds without a vote of the people. And I think, frankly, it's outrageous. I think they're spendthrifts. I think they nearly have jacked up the whole problem with Offutt Air Force Base with submitting competing proposals for money. In my opinion, they're out of control. And so I suggested to the senator, and of course he's a former member of the NRD and all that, and I understand his point of view. Very cordial conversation, but I said the least you can do is require that they go to a vote of the people. And I know that they'll just launch a big advertising program with, you know, showing water with people with water up to their necks and say that this will happen to you. They need to refocus. They already had ads on television, a news story on television showing 84th, I think it was 84th and West Center and the interstate underwater. You know, if they would spend that money to build projects such as Tranquility Park and NP Dodge that are actually, those soccer fields are not soccer fields. They are floodplain. And I know when I was mayor, I used to get calls from people just irate that they couldn't play soccer because the fields were underwater. And then I told them, well, they're really not soccer fields. They're there to gather water when, you know, that's what they're built for. And we just have soccer there as kind of a sideline. And they were surprised. So that's what they need to do. They need to take that money of building these lakes that do not prevent flooding at all. They're just worthless for flood prevention. When you think about it, just common sense. Here's a lake with, you know, so much water in it, and then you get 14 inches of water. What do you think happens? It'll build up into there, and pretty soon, guess what? It goes over the top. And then there are breaches along the side. It is amazing the number of dams that have failed in Iowa, Texas, every time, and we have no guarantee that it's not going to happen here. And actually, I think it places us in danger. Dams are great for recreation. Call it what it is. But they should not be considered prevention of floods. They just simply, it's not in the picture. So I said, the least you can do is put it to a vote of the people. He wasn't too hot on that. I said, okay, then a compromise. Allow Douglas County to put our measly $18 million bond issue on 911 and all the public safety needs, give us the right to vote on that, you know, that we don't have to submit that to the voters. And he said, well, that's an interesting concept. So I just think the NRD of all the governmental bodies is, boy, they ought to be under a conservatorship from the courts, I'm telling you. They write money like they've got it, and it's our money. So anyway, that's where that went.
I think it might be worth, Commissioner Boyle, to have a conversation with the executive director, because there have been changes on this.
That'd be great. Yeah.
And in their defense, it was really the NRD that stepped up on the Offutt project, but that's $9 million out of their budget that will now not be used for other projects that they had on the table. What this, which I didn't realize until I talked to John, was the legislation actually makes it more constrictive in order to do that, and they still can't go above their mill levy, the 4 or 4.5 cents. So that's not, they're not going to go out and spend willy-nilly. But it also does allow the smaller communities within the NRDs across the state to be able to do the same thing. So what they would have to do, there's a, I can't remember what it's called, the watershed, there's a fund, there's a watershed fund that the state is going to allow funds to sit in, but then they have to apply for them. And they can only take, there has to be a 60-40 split, so they're not going to be able to, again, spend willy-nilly on that. If the state doesn't have the funds, the only amount that they can take from that fund is up to 60%, and then they would have to find the 40% someplace else. So I think they've heard that they're not, you know, we don't want governmental entities to just be able to go spend willy-nilly. I think that they are trying to still provide what they need to provide, and it's not just dams. It's in smaller communities across the state, it's actually for cleaner water. It's for their water systems that they would be able to use.
Too bad that's
money
not here.
for.
Too bad that's not here.
I know. So anyway, I would just encourage you, as opposed as we have been, I think that there have been some factors that have come into play that I think we need to take into consideration, and so I would just encourage everybody to have their conversation with the executive director or another board member of the NRD. Commissioner Morgan?
Appreciate the comments. I think it'd be good if we can maybe to have it on the agenda next week and let, if they want, come down and maybe some questions are asked. We be respectful, listen, and comment on it. I do think the Offutt thing was a big deal because there wasn't anyone else to step up to do that, is my understanding. Right. But again, we can ask questions about that. So I think that's, right. It would be good if they can be here next week. Sure. You know, maybe we'll hear about it.
Yep.
Okay.
Commissioner Boyle?
Well, I like a bulletproof vest when they show up, but anyway, at least a shield. You know, really, they are willy-nilly spenders. They are out of control. And the fact of the matter is, if you read anything about, and the World Herald just a couple of days ago talked about what was going on at Offutt, and there was criticism of Mr. Winkler for proposing projects competing for the funds for Offutt. I mean, what in the world are you thinking? How important Offutt Air Force Base is to this community, and then he had a couple ought that competed for the funds. We ought to ask him about that for starters. The other thing is Patrick Leahy sent an email. He's a really nice young man. Sent an email to us. I don't know who all got it, but I read it last night about 10 o'clock, and I thought, this is really, you know what I thought. So I wrote back to him. He wanted to have some kind of a joint effort in doing low-impact development, that we would spend money along with others to do the work of the NRD, and I said, absolutely not. You know, you do your job. Why don't you contribute to us to help us with the mentally ill? Let's do that. Let's have a contract with you. You give us 50 grand to help us treat the mentally ill. Then we'll start talking. It is outrageous that they would ask us. You know, I like the guy, but it's outrageous that the NRD would ask us to contribute to low-impact development funding. That is just, they should be doing that. They should be doing this instead of these dams. I pointed out to the senator also that the way we were treated with LB 160, Hal Dobb was lobbying, a paid lobbyist for the NRD, and his cousin, Mr. Senator Gay, was the head of the committee. Nice arrangement. And so anyway, and now Mr. Gay works with Mr. Dobb. In any event, that's life. So Mr. Gay, Tim Gay, was a senator that led LB 160, and we complained along with Washington County about what was going on in 160. This is probably 8 years ago now or something. And so they said, okay, here's the deal. We'll allow counties to veto any dam that is exclusively within their jurisdiction. Well, guess what? There are no dams that are exclusively within our jurisdiction. We kind of pimped them on the last deal when they were doing 15A. We wrote a letter, Commissioner Borgeson signed it and said, we object to this dam. And they wrote back, it's not exclusively in your jurisdiction. Well, of course, we knew it wasn't. So this is the games they play with us. And I told the senator, I said, this is really an affront to us, treating us like infants, patting us on the top of the head, knowing full well that none of this ever comes into play. Very disingenuous. And it really speaks to, frankly, the way they operate as far as I'm concerned. And I also told him that I resurrected an old idea that I brought up years ago when I was mayor. I think it's time for Douglas County to form our own resource district. Pull out of the PAPIO and say, we're pulling out, we're going to use our money in Douglas County to do what we think is right, and that's low-impact development. I think we ought to seriously consider it, because they are building dams that are not doing a damn thing to stop flooding. Off my soapbox.
Commissioner Kavanaugh?
I did receive as well the email from Patrick Leahy, who's a director of the PAPIO NRD. He didn't ask us for any money. What he proposed was a collaborative partnership on low-impact development water projects, and offered us $50,000 to do one of these. They are currently in partnership with Metro Community College, and I think that's something that we should pursue. So I endorse the chairman's idea of sitting down and talking with them and pursuing the generous offer of $50,000 to maybe do some of these on property that we have standing idle right now.
Thank you. With that, there is, I will put it on the agenda for next week and ask them
notify
to be here, yes. Any other legislation that someone would like to talk about?
Well,
Otherwise,
if we're going to put it on the agenda, and I commend that, I would make, in addition to the executive director, an invitation directly to Director Leahy, who is good enough to contact us individually, to come and speak to us as well.
Sure.
That'd be great.
Sure.
Good. Thank you.
With that, there is one other resolution, and it is a resolution opposing the United States participation in the Trans-Pacific Partnership Trade Agreement. Commissioner Boyle, this is yours. That was held over from January 26, 2016.
He keeps talking to me. What are we?
Do I have to separate you two?
I'm sorry, what was this about?
This was the TPP. You
Oh,
want
yes,
the
yes.
resolution opposed? You
Well-
want this held over, or what do you want to do with it?
Well, I think what I need to do is, I don't know that if we're ready to vote on it, that'd be fine, but I'm not sure that everybody really is tuned into what the issue really is and how they feel about it. So I feel strongly about it, and I'm willing to, if people feel like they're informed enough, I'm willing to put it to a vote right now if I can, but I don't know whether...
It's on as opposing the...
Right.
Is this
Well-
late left over, or is this good?
I'll tell you what, why don't...
You want to talk to it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just soon discuss it and maybe do a vote today, and if necessary, I'll change my position and bring it back next week or whatever
Okay.
if it doesn't
All right,
pass.
Commissioner Kavanaugh.
I think we all recall we had a presentation
Yes.
from the AFL-CIO and other allied groups in favor of Commissioner Boyle's resolution, which I support.
Good.
And I think that we laid it over for scheduling purposes, nothing else. So we've had the presentation and what discussion we need to have,
Okay.
and I would second the motion if you're
Great.
making it to approve it today.
Good.
Is that a motion to?
Yes, a motion and a second. That
Okay.
sounds good.
No other questions or comments? Please vote.
If you oppose, you vote yes.
Motion passes.
With
Great.
that, we do have need for an executive session for litigation and negotiations, labor negotiations. Is there a motion?
So move.
Please vote.
And while there's a moment of silence, thank you very much for that vote on the labor issue. Except Duda and I have to talk.
Did you?
Mr. Rogers? Motion passes.
talk to you over there for a minute later. Okay. Jim to update you. Hey, Joe.
Commissioner Kavanaugh, do you, if he wants me to make him a yes. And maybe Claire left. Here's Claire. Okay. I'll just wait since they're here. Motion passes.
Spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountain majesty, above the fruited plain. America, America, God shed His grace on thee, and crown thy good with brotherhood, from sea to shining sea.